This is BoomerLife on CL650.
This is BoomerLife on CL650. I'm Joanne Sutton, and thanks for being with us today. Today's guests are associated with the Alzheimer's Society of British Columbia, and our main topic of discussion is centered around the diagnosis, getting it, and delivering the news. In studio, we're joined by the Alzheimer's Society of BC CEO, Maria Howard, as well as we just heard from Spirit of the West lead man, John Mann, and his wife of 30 years, Jill Dom. And now we're pleased to welcome our next guest. This is Dr. Bruce Hobson. Bruce is called in by telephone, and we're hoping he's going to share some perspective on the giving end of this conversation on diagnosis. So, Bruce, thanks for joining us today.
You're welcome, and thank you for having me.
So I understand you're a recently retired and maybe a refocused GP of over 30 years, calling in from Powell River. We're very grateful that you're part of this conversation as we talk about the impact of a diagnosis of dementia. Now, you're a family physician, and I'm certain over numerous occasions faced that situation where you had to be the one to deliver a diagnosis to somebody with Alzheimer's disease or other dementias. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about that, what it was like to be on that side of the equation.
It's tough. It's especially when you've been in a small town and working for a long time with people that have been your patients and your friends and people you've known all your life. To be having to talk to them about this diagnosis is very difficult. It's hard on me, it's hard on the patients, and it's hard on their families.
So from what I understand, over time you've been a very supportive person of First Link, which is one of the formal referral programs with the Alzheimer's Society of BC. And that's where healthcare providers give people receiving the diagnosis an option of being connected with the society automatically after they've maybe had a little while to digest the information about their situation. Tell us about your association with the Alzheimer's Society and why you're such a supporter of the First Link program.
Well, you know, in my earlier years of practice, when I was having to talk with patients and their families about the diagnosis of cognitive impairment and dementia, Alzheimer's, it was really challenging because one of the questions people had is, well, what's going to happen? And you can tell people and give them information, but it's not the same as being able to give them support. And one of the things that surprised me and discouraged and dismayed me a little bit was in a lot of the small towns and in ours, we didn't have really well-established support networks. And when I found at one point that we didn't even have a patient group, support group for cognitive impairment. And I had talked with the Alzheimer's Society, and at that time they were rolling out First Link and talked to us about having the opportunity to bring First Link to Powell River and to our patients and introduce the doctors to the resource so that they could refer their patients to it. And so we had an educational session a number of years ago that described what First Link was and what it did and how it could help with patients. And that they came and did presentation, and out of that, a patient support group also formed to help support patients. And the difference that made to the patients and families was really significant.
It's immeasurable because until that time, I guess you were the only go-to person as being a physician in that community. Where else did people turn for help?
Well, you know, and that's just it. They would turn to their family physicians when and if their loved ones had more difficulty with their cognitive impairment. They would seek the support of home and community care workers. We had some psychiatrists and mental health workers that would help with some of the counseling, but it wasn't the same as being able to talk to other people that either had cognitive impairment or were family members of people with cognitive impairment. And being able to have that kind of a connection, to know that you're not alone, and that you can talk to others who have been through the same types of things that you're experiencing, is really valuable. It's more than just a doctor being able to say, here's the diagnosis and here's what is going on, as compared to talking to somebody who is really experienced and knows what you're talking about.
I think you've really just hit that nail on the head again. It's so important for not just the person receiving the diagnosis, but for the entire family as well, to know that they're not alone, that there are options for them to reach out and get some of the support that they need. So when you were giving some of your patients formal referrals to this First Link Dementia Support Program, did you get any feedback from them?
Oh, tremendous. It makes all the difference in the world to be able to have a place that you can go to be able to get information, to have somebody that you can talk to that can provide you some firsthand information, some safe information that you know that can be trusted. And for me as a physician to know that my patients had that place to go to, and not that they wouldn't be dependent on me. I appreciated that I provided value there, but to be able to have access to information on a timely basis that they could trust was really key. And then linking them to other families, caregivers, and patients that had the same diagnosis was so very important.
So, Bruce, we often ask people if they have a personal connection to the disease when they come on this BoomerLife show. Mm-hmm. And I'm also wondering if you do, and if that has impacted how you approached your position as a physician.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think most of us have had some connection. And my father's mother, my grandmother, had dementia. And my parents, when they were younger, and she was having more problems with being able to care for herself and needed more support. She lived with them first and then had to live in supported care and residential care. And I very clearly remember that, and it had a huge impact on me. We felt, even with both my father and I being physicians, we felt more alone without being able to have a resource like First Link or other families that we could talk to about the challenges of being caregivers. And my parents now are still alive, and they're in their mid-80s, and fortunately no signs of dementia. And, you know, I do recognize that it still can happen, and I hope that now, with these resources available, that should there be anything happen with them, that I'll be able to fall back on those resources as well and be able to have them make use of those resources.
It's a little comforting to know that there is a bit of a cushion there as well. So yep. Just in wrapping up our conversation today, what would you recommend for families or individuals that might help prepare them with the news of an Alzheimer's or a dementia diagnosis? Is there any expertise that you could offer?
I think the most important thing is, as far as the relationship goes with the physician and the family, is really make sure that you've got that solid relationship and with a family physician, and take the time to get the information right. Ask for extra time. If you're a caregiver, go with your parent or loved one that has cognitive impairment, and attend the visits with the physician if you can, and keep track of what's being said and ask questions. I think the key thing is building trust and getting as much information as possible from a source that is dependable. And your family physician can certainly provide that link to all the tools and resources, the appropriateness of or not of prescribing medications and moving forward. So, the final word here, I think, is really develop that relationship, have the conversations, and spend the time, ask the questions. I think that's the key thing. And really most important to remember is that this doesn't mean that the person that is cognitively impaired somehow stops existing. They're still people, and they still have feelings, and they needed to be included in their care. There's hope, and the path and the journey that they take on this is certainly something that can be made easier and more comfortable, and people can still be productive.
Well, the doctor knows best. Dr. Bruce Hobson, thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us today about getting and giving a diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease and dementia. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for doing this program.
You're listening to Boomer Life on CL 650. We're about to lighten up the conversation a little bit with a look forward to the Scotiabank Half Marathon and 5K and a fun fundraising perspective from one of the most dedicated participants. That's all next on CL 650.
Celebrating the baby boomer lifestyle. This is Boomer Life on CL 650.